So this is going to be, I think, a pretty nuanced video. And if it's one of the first videos you've ever watched on my channel, it might be a difficult place to start. I wanted to give that heads up because I'm going to be talking about things that are pretty nitty gritty. But before I get into it, I just want to let you know, if you don't already have a copy, the Kindle version of The Joy of Not Thinking, which is one of my favorite things I've ever written, is free today. If you're watching this video when it comes out, The Joy of Not Thinking, the Kindle version of that book is free today. I will put the link below. You should be able to download it for free on Kindle. And if you like my stuff, I think you'll like that book. And yeah, what I want to discuss today pertains to some of the main subjects I often talk about and discuss in detail in The Joy of Not Thinking. I'm a big believer in utilizing rational thinking, and utilize the amazing power that our brain has to be logical and be rational some of the time. And at the same time, recognizing that many of us, if not all of us, have a tendency to really overthink things. And that by overthinking things, being overly analytical, overly rational, overly logical, we tend to screw ourselves up emotionally and become much more stressed out than we need to be. And there are many ways to basically, improve upon our overthinking so it doesn't bother us as much, and to think less, basically. Of course, we're still thinking, but we're not thinking as rationally, as logically, or as painfully and anxiously as we once were. Once we realized that by doing very simple things, we can change our thinking patterns and change our tendency to overthink. So we don't worry about our thoughts as much. We don't worry about what's going through our head as much. And again, I discuss this a lot in The Joy of Not Thinking. And I give many examples of, like, for instance, if you're very playful and like move around for a minute or two, you will notice that your thinking patterns and your overthinking is going to dissipate just by doing that. Or if I talk in a funny voice like this for a very short period of time out loud to myself, you could also talk to somebody else like this, but it's probably going to be more comfortable for you just to talk to yourself like this. If I talk like this in a really funny voice to myself for just a few minutes out loud, my thinking patterns are going to change. And I'm no longer going to be thinking in quite such a serious way, such a logical way, being so rational. The veil will be kind of lifted, and when the veil's lifted, I'll notice that, oh my gosh, my thinking is what's really bothering me, not the actual external situation. By doing something like that, you very quickly can alleviate overthinking, and again, see how the overthinking and being so rational is often causing the problem as opposed to help solve the problem. This is not to say that we should not be rational, that we should not be logical. It's very good to be that way. But when it comes to our emotional health, when it comes to just feeling more relaxed, more in flow during our day, feeling better, it really is advantageous to think less a lot of the time, and to use our hard thinking skills, our rational skills when we need to, but not to be so self-analytical or so dependent on that thinkingness of our mind. And that's one reason that, especially when it comes to changing our world from the inside out and demonstrating or manifesting better things in our external reality, I often talk about this, and also talk about just becoming more familiar with how we feel and less dependent on what we're thinking rationally, right? There's tremendous value in feeling your feelings, basically, is what it comes down to. if there's a feeling of what seems like sadness and it's manifesting or, in like your chest area, to just feel that and not to overly analyze it. Maybe not to even call it sadness, but just to feel the feeling, right? And we made many videos about this, and, teachers like David Hawkins talk about this really well. I'll put a link above to a recent workshop I did, just talking about, working with this emotional resistance and feeling your feelings. And also, um, you know, utilizing the ability to feel our feelings as a way to become curious about ourselves. In using modalities like internal family systems, IFS for short, to, ask ourselves questions. It's like, you as your big self can ask yourself, like, you can ask this feeling that's bothering you, that feels like sadness, right? You can ask this, like, you can ask that feeling, what do you want? What do you want me to do? And you'll be surprised, by asking questions and becoming curious about your feelings and not judging them so rationally, but instead being more emotionally in tune with them. You'll start getting answers. And these uncomfortable feelings will often help direct us in the right direction in terms of where we want to go. And they'll help us feel better. And that makes sense because by becoming more friendly with our feelings, and especially these uncomfortable feelings that perhaps we've turned away from or wanted to avoid for most of our adult lives, by becoming more friendly with them, we just feel better and more in tune, both internally and usually externally, right? And I say that because, despite the fact that I'm a huge believer or proponent of utilizing more emotional intimacy in our daily life, and feeling our feelings more. And it's something that I've really focused on myself over the last several years, because it's something I used to shy away from. And I used to be much more into just, like, making funny noises or being playful, as I showed you earlier in this video, to just kind of, let the feeling, see how not serious the feeling was, right? I've now become much more comfortable with being intimate and letting the feelings be there and working through them and working with them, right? But that being said, you still can't always simply recognize that the feeling, in all likelihood, is stemming from overthinking in some way. Okay, this is why this is a nuanced video. The first thing I was covering here, like, and that I talk a lot about in The Joy of Not Thinking, is recognizing that overthinking is often causing our anxiety, if not always causing our anxiety, right? And that the feelings that we take so seriously are often basically caused by imaginally looping negative thoughts over and over again, which causes a feeling or a constriction or a contraction in the body that we then call fear or sadness or anger or shame, right? And it's good often, as I said in the second part of this video, to feel into that and to get more intimate about what's happening there. But I would argue a lot of those feelings, a lot of that stuff that we can work with imaginally through, doing the letting go process that David Hawkins talks about, or by doing IFS work, it's still stemming from thought and overthinking. This is what's sneaky. Because, like, if you go like, "Wah!" for a minute or two and get really into something and jumping up and down or barking like a dog, that will dissipate that uncomfortable feeling if you have an uncomfortable feeling. Why is that? It's because your thought pattern changes. Your thought pattern changes. When you drop that serious, persistent thought pattern, basically like, oh, I'm so sad, I'm so sad, I'm so sad, I'm so sad. Subconsciously, that's kind of like what we're thinking. It's just we don't notice it. If we're able to drop that which we can do by doing something very outrageous with our body, or being very playful, or talking out like this is getting really crazy, or perhaps becoming very still. You got to find what works for you. But by doing something outrageous with our body, we'll often notice that this feeling that we think is like this real thing, this sadness is a real thing. Wah! It's not real like we thought. It's a thought pattern that can be dropped. You know, I had an interesting conversation with Sam Cabert a couple of weeks ago. I'll put a link above to that as well. And Sam was just talking about how feelings are processed by the body according to, I think if that woman who had that stroke who wrote that book, and maybe some scientists as well, he was saying feelings are processed by the body in 90 seconds. 90 seconds, which means like, you know, we often hear that example like in the wild, like, what is it, like gazelles getting chased by the lion, right? And like they run away. Or zebras, I guess it's zebras, right? Why zebras don't get ulcers, there's that famous book. Zebras run away from the lions, and then like they're shaking their bodies to get that like that distress and anxiety and trauma from running away out of their system. So there's no long-term trauma, right? It's the same thing. Like humans, you know, according to some, I guess, scientific studies now, like are actually able to process difficult feelings, like the visceral aspect of them, really quickly. Like say 90 seconds. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it's very interesting to consider. And it also goes, you know, it aligns nicely with a lot of the stuff that Emile Coué talks about, where he goes, if you feel a pain or there's some emotional distress, if you rub that part of your body or rub your head and say, it passes, 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 it passes. If you do that, which is very similar to like a lot of the playfulness stuff we were just talking about, or doing something outrageous with your body, if you do that, it will clear out that pain really quickly. So why does this emotional pain particularly seem to persist if our body can process it very quickly in 90 seconds or a few minutes or something like that? Well, in all likelihood, it's because of the overthinking and persistently thinking something over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And again, I'm all for getting to know the feeling better so we can process it more easily. But I'm saying the hack to process it really quickly, in terms of process it out, right? And it might come back, but to process it out is simply to realize it's fucking thinking and get the fuck out of your mind. Stop overthinking. And this is not something to hear, this is something to do. And, you know, this kind of stuff, this playfulness, if you learn about it and you start to do it, it's one thing to learn about it, but you have to do it. It changes your approach to life, because you realize like the stress might still show up all the time, right? But even if the stress shows up all the time, you realize that a way to nip it in the bud quickly is to be playful or move around. Potentially, you can just do that. And also, you know, it's just not real. It's these thought patterns going again and again and again and again and again. And you can stop those thought patterns from bothering you as much by just like basically doing something outrageous with your body, or talking out loud to yourself and realizing this is my thoughts that's really bothering me. My body internally has already processed this feeling, you know, the feeling of the zebra running away from the lion and being scared, you know, very quickly. You know, it's like when something bad happens, right? But like no one's seriously hurt, and we're all like, oh my God, like we talk about it and like we process it, we try to even laugh about it. That's like a way of processing it, right? We don't hold it in the body then. And by doing something outrageous with our body, wiping it out, some of the stuff I talk about in The Joy of Not Thinking, we can do that. So that's not a magic pill. It's not like, oh my God, I'm never going to have any problems again. I'm never going to be stressed out again. Not at all. But those are incredibly underutilized tools. And doing them alongside becoming more intimate with your emotions and the feelings you have that come through is really helpful. And I mean, I do all this stuff in my own life. Do anything that you think will work, right? Anything that will make you feel better in the moment, more fulfilled, less stressed, less anxious, less worried. But there are some really cool hacks that can make you realize that, oh my God, this thing that is bothering me so much really, really is not the external thing, it's my thinking. And then you start to look at your life more that way, where it's like, wow, my biggest problems in my life are my thinking. And that makes you approach your life differently. And I think in a more rewarding way. So this was a pretty nuanced video, but I hope that some of you got something out of it. Again, the joy of not thinking. I go much more in detail about some of the stuff I talked about in this video in the joy of not thinking, and probably in a more comprehensible way. But yeah, if you have questions or are interested in coaching, I can be reached at radicalcounselor.com. And enjoy not thinking.